Oh, wait. Okay, I messed up here. All right.
Daniel Parker presents from the team that brought you Angel's Awakening. After 100 years, Henry Hatcher is awoken to fight his mortal enemy. But he is not alone. Guardian Angel.
Okay, so sorry about that, folks. Here's what happened. I can't go on. It wouldn't let me go on Twitter. The stream wouldn't go on Twitter because I have to have a premium account on Twitter now.
Elon?
Yeah. God damn it, Elon. Okay.
I mean, I get that it's a money burning operation, but still, it's
Yeah.
you're kind of nickel and diming people.
Yeah, I couldn't figure out what was going on. I was looking at it, and I'm like, what the heck? It said it wasn't going live. That's why I stopped the counter because I didn't think we were live. But we're live on YouTube. But it wasn't going live on X because it said I have to have a premium membership on X.
Oh well, hardly the most catastrophic thing that happened this weekend.
That is true. Yes, that is true.
Puts everything into context.
Yeah. But yeah, welcome to another a special Sunday episode of Critique Corner with me, Daniel Parker,
and me, DB Fastbinder, and we should be back to a regular schedule this week. Just been having a lot of work and personal events happening at inconvenient times in the week.
Indeed, yeah, and as you know, of course, with DB alluded to with the events from yesterday, we're hoping that we can provide a diversion for everybody with our little show here. So,
yes, indeed, and that little show is Critique Corner with me, DB Fastbinder.
Yes, and me, Daniel Parker.
Yes. All right, now that we've gotten through our scuffed introduction,
yeah,
let's do something we haven't done for a bit. Let's talk some box office.
Indeed, yes.
So last weekend we missed the opening of Despicable Me, which Despicable Me is going to be slightly hard to talk about from a numbers perspective because the darn smart people opened up on a Wednesday right before July 4th.
Yeah.
Which means the weekend over weekend comparisons are slightly misleading and hard to apply.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, that being the case, it's its second weekend. It clearly took the box office in the second weekend with a mere 40% drop, which even if you assume that initial, it would have been more of a drop if the money that they had made the previous Wednesday and Thursday had gone into Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
That's still a really healthy hold, and a $10,000 per theater average is nothing to scoff at.
No, that is not.
Yeah, it's not down that much from the 17,000 average the week before. I should say, that's a 40% drop, but it's like, oh no, we can make payroll this week. Darned, say the movie theaters.
Yeah.
So I don't really have an opinion on this movie one way or the other. Despicable Me is not a franchise I have a whole lot of use for.
Yeah, I watched I've seen the first two, I think. I haven't seen the third one, and I've seen both of the Minions movies. They're entertaining enough to hold your attention, but they're not like Pixar in its heyday.
I'm tempted. Was it the third one that had one of the guys from South Park in it as a voice?
Probably.
I'd be tempted just to see what they did for his character, but I remember I watched part of the first one and walked out on my parents who were watching it. No, thank you. And then back in my days as a substitute teacher, I ended up watching it with the class, and I thought, okay, this one's reasonably entertaining. It's just very much like cinematic junk food.
Yeah.
Or maybe junk food is being too cruel. It's cinematic comfort food. It isn't going to make you question your place in the world or anything like that.
Right. Yeah. Mm.
That is not what illumination animation is about.
Yeah.
Coming in at second, we have our biggest new release. We have Long Legs, which I'm
Mhm.
assuming is a horror movie based on the fact that it was actually released in theaters and made money.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw Film Threats review of it. It's very much in the vein of Silence of the Lambs.
Okay.
Yeah. And it got good reviews from Chris Gore. I can't remember what Alan Ning thought of it.
I think is Alan the one who isn't much of a horror guy? I seem to recall that coming up.
Yeah, that's him. Yeah.
Yeah. Continuing to move down, the big winner is Inside Out 2, and I can't see Despicable Me dethroning it. It had such a strong opening that it's just
Yeah.
insurmountable. But boy, I think the biggest difference with this box office compared to previous ones is that actually I don't even know if this was released in China. Well, it was, but it's like very small and muted.
Mm, man.
35 million after a couple weeks, or actually after a month or so. So the era where Hollywood has any reason to listen to the Chinese Communist Party about what they should be putting in the movies so it can release in China is kind of over. At least it should be if anybody's being smart about it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Because like that was
Jeez.
always fool's gold anyway because of how little they actually got from it. I swear they mostly did it for like bragging rights and maybe having like a Chinese company invest money in the movie itself.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully those days are, yeah, like you said, hopefully those days are long gone.
Yeah. So here, then we got A Quiet Place Day One, which holding on pretty well. 116 million. Okay, with the troubles Paramount's been having, I'm sure this is very happy for them.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if they had any other movies this year that hit 100 million.
I don't think so.
Let's see here. Well, this isn't helpful. I want. Should, okay, well, I guess their market share is, yeah, their market share is actually up year over year, so
Hmm.
that's good for them.
Yeah.
But this isn't showing their releases just for 2024. Actually, upcoming releases, no. Yeah, yeah, not too helpful. What the
Hmm.
2026 Aang the Last Airbender? No. What
Oh,
is this?
what?
Untitled animated Aang Avatar film? No. Leave it alone.
Yeah.
All right, moving down the list. Fly Me to the Moon, 10 million opening, which I think this has some names. It has Tatum and Johansson.
Hmm.
Tatum has really turned into like a rom com guy.
Yeah. Well,
Production
yeah.
budget 100 million. Oof.
That's a lot. That most of that was probably everyone's salary.
Yeah. I watched the film threat review of this one. Chris Gore hated it, and I think Alan was more positive on it. It just sounds like they turned the Apollo 11 mission into a rom com,
Yeah.
which I could see having mixed results.
Yeah.
But yeah, that thing is bombing compared to its budget, which means that all the money they're making from Bad Boys Ride or Die is probably getting sucked up by that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Definitely.
Which, well, that's the movie biz.
Yep.
Speaking of, well, that's the movie biz. Horizon, an American Saga Chapter 1. Kevin
Oh.
Costner's movies that it's on the list of movies that probably should have been a TV show.
Yeah. Yeah, from what I hear, it's 3 hours and it's only part one. It's supposedly like 4 parts, I think, or something.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
part two is finished. They were going to release it with like next month, which is kind of an insane window. So that's probably getting kicked back to try to give this a chance to get some more buzz. Because it sounds
yeah,
like they're going to try to get it, get it over on streaming and video on demand because theater demand is not very high.
right. Yeah,
Rounding out the top 10, you know that the numbers are small when the numbers doesn't bother to actually number any of these.
yeah.
Um, Maxine
Ooh,
uh, at in its second weekend at 2 million, which I did not actually hear anything about this movie. I just know it exists.
mm. Yeah, I don't know much
Film
about
star
it
and
either.
aspiring actress Maxine Minks finally gets her big break, and as a mysterious killer stalks the starlets of Hollywood, a trail of blood threatens to reveal her sinister past. Okay, that premise isn't getting me.
No.
Then rounding out the top 10, we have Sound of Hope, the story of Possum Trot, which, slightly underperforming the previous one in the series, which I know
Yeah.
okay, it isn't actually a continuation of A Sound of Freedom, but
Yeah.
they're definitely trying to go for the same sort of thing. But it'd be kind of stupid to figure that you could like replicate that. So hopefully
Yeah.
they didn't sink too much money into it.
Yeah. Hopefully not. Yeah.
They did line up a distribution deal with the Daily Wire, so I guess they have alternative sources of funding besides box office receipts, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then this better be the right Lion King that they've re-released. It is
Oh yeah,
good.
it is. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that they put the Lion King out. It is. Is it the highest grossing Disney animated one of all time? Like 2D animated? If it isn't,
Maybe.
yeah. From what I've heard, that everyone was really surprised at just how successful The Lion King was, because it was basically animated by their B team.
Yeah.
It just goes to show you that you can't, that's the movie business. You can't count on anything.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
But what I will say is that it's nice to actually have some big numbers to report, in that while there are bombs on this list, it's not, well, there's another bomb.
Yeah.
There's another bomb.
Yeah.
Speaking of bombs, and speaking of our, we're here to bring you a little bit of reprieve from the horrific events of the weekend. So, in light of that, our first movie is the story of a group of refugees invading a land that does not want them, and it clearly has clearly has no applicability to anything real life.
Oh yes.
The Warcraft movie.
Yeah. Oh, jeez.
So we picked this one because it had just dropped on Netflix, and last week when we were looking at it, it had managed to climb its way up to being the number 3 movie on the platform.
Yeah, for some reason.
Well, okay. I mean, Madam Web managed to get to number 1, but that is entirely because it's in the category of, I never saw Madam Web. I guess this is my chance. I suspect that this was slept on by a lot of people. And so a lot of people saw it show up on their list and go, I never did bother to go see this, so why not?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I remember when it came out, and I just remember seeing all the CGI in it, and I thought it looked a little too cartoonish, so I avoided it. And plus I also avoided it too because I never played Warcraft. I've never played World of Warcraft. Didn't know anything about the lore or any of the characters, any of that. Just no knowledge of any of it whatsoever.
Yep, and I'm in the same boat. I've played like maybe a half hour of Warcraft 2 one time at my cousin's place, and that is the extent of my knowledge of the series.
Yeah. Um,
outside
Yeah.
just like a little bit of cultural osmosis from people who do. But even then, I basically know there are two sides. One side has orcs, the other side has humans.
Yes. Yeah. Um,
And
yeah.
boy, a week after watching this, I don't know that I know a whole lot more about the Warcraft lore.
Yeah. I don't either. Yeah. So apparently, there are what was it, like 5 different kingdoms, I think, or something like that.
No, what was it? Five Kingdoms of Men.
Yeah, something. Yeah, I can't remember.
All right, let's just take a pause here. Uh,
Okay.
so the overall story of this and the way it's framed is strange because it starts off with a narrator speaking over a generic battle scene, like where it's clearly a desolate battle. And it's like the last few people on it, and a human fighting an orc from the orc's POV, I believe.
Yeah.
It's like this is the story of the first encounter between the humans and orcs. This was already a mistake from the perspective of advertising this to a general audience, in my opinion, because why do we care that it's the first battle between the humans and the orcs? Don't tell us it's a prequel. Just just get to the movie.
Yeah. Yes, as they said on Monty Python, just get on with it.
Get on with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm going to say there are two sections of this movie. There is the part with the orcs, and there is the completely uninteresting human part of the movie. At least that was my take on it.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, like the human character, the main human character in the movie, and I couldn't stop cracking up every time they said his name. Uh, his name is Lothar.
Is it not Lothar of the Hill People?
Yeah, Lothar of the Hill People. That's the only thing I kept thinking of the entire time is that.
I had never actually seen that sketch until you linked it to me.
Yeah. So yeah, so one of what we're referring to is it was a SNL bit with Mike Myers playing a character named Lothar of the Hill People. I am Lothar of the Hill People.
Yeah, they basically had like exaggerated accents. They were some sort of cavemen or steppe people or something.
Yeah.
And then the whole thing was an analogy for sexual performance, I guess.
Yeah.
Sometimes I walked too quickly, and sometimes a man walks slowly. You are a woman. Tell me, why do women walk strangely? Well, imagine a cave, and at the head of the cave is a small protector. Ah, like such and such the gnome.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. I think I'm going to call this movie a case where being lore accurate becomes a problem.
Yeah.
Because I think there are a lot of elements in the human kingdoms where it's like, oh my God, Daniel, it's Medivh, Medivh, Medivh. I don't know how to pronounce that.
Yeah, I can't remember how they pronounced it in the movie. Yeah, it was like Medve, yeah.
Medveh sounds right.
Medve, yeah.
But we'll dispense with that in a moment. The interesting part of the movie is with the orcs, because the orcs are basically from a parallel world where the fell magic of the evil. Let's see here, who played
what was his name?
The problem, of course, is that IMDb has all the actors with their humans' faces there.
Yeah.
Was it Gul'dan?
No. Gul'dan, yes, that's what it was. Yeah.
No. Oh, yeah, Gul'dan. Okay. Yeah. So the evil Gul'dan, a wizard who has taken control of the orc horde, is he is basically his dark magic has depleted all of the life force from the world that they came from. So their plan is they're going to open up this portal and invade a lush green world occupied by the human races and take it over.
Yeah.
I had never realized that the orcs were green because they were full of this evil fell magic, but apparently that's the case.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. Yeah.
Because the orcs who have resisted getting the fell magic to increase their powers, including our main character, is it Durotan? That was the main guy.
I think
Okay,
so.
clearly IMDb is letting me down here. Warcraft movie characters. The problem, folks, is when you commit the movie to your short-term memory, and then you have to remember it 3 days after you were planning to remember it.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Found it on Screen Rant. Let me go ahead and shoot that to you in the background, just so that
Okay.
you also have access. Because, yeah, you might say, GDB, it sure is a bad sign that you guys can't remember any of the characters' names except for the one that's a reference to an old SNL sketch, and you would be right.
Yeah.
It is a problem that the characters didn't leave that much of an impact.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Duratan, he's like the good orc. He's the head of his tribe. And the first scene, he smuggles his wife, who is with child, along with them in their initial raid, and she gives birth on the other side, and we get a pretty horrifying scene where the evil guy sucks the life out of a small deer, I think a chevrotan, and shoves it into the child, turning him green and bringing him to life.
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember, and then what happened after that?
Well, then we cut to some of the human stuff, so it was inherently
yeah.
uninteresting. Because
Yeah.
basically, what's going on is it is the fall. By the way, spoilers.
Yes.
8-year-old movie that nobody cared about, and if you're a Netflix subscriber and you cared about it, you statistically already watched it. We're just here to kick it a little bit.
Yes.
So, so this is basically the downfall of the wizard Medve. Because he apparently has fallen to the fell without realizing it, even though he's the main guy who's in charge of managing or suppressing the fell.
Right. And they kind of, there's some suspicions about it because there's this other wizard guy who
He was a wizard, but then he left.
yeah. Cod Cod
Khadgar.
Khadgar. Yeah. And yeah, he's been suspecting Medved of or whatever his name is of doing some bad stuff, but nobody wants to believe it. Like Lothar doesn't want to believe it. The king doesn't want to believe it because they're like old buddies.
Right. And that's a storyline that I think could have been interesting, but they didn't really. They didn't manage to imbue it with the same humanity that they imbued the orc story with, which is strange to say, but it's accurate.
Yeah.
Because the orc story was it's a story of like betrayal and Duratan being worried about his wife and new child and just trying to make a good life for them. And in the meantime, like the humans are they're defending their kingdoms, but they don't really make you care about their kingdoms.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really don't have a much of a yeah, I didn't really have much care about like the king and like and all that stuff. I just like, yeah, all right, whatever. And also too, like Lothar has a son, um, and I can't remember what his son's name was. Um, and I I actually looked up the actor who played his son. Like, there isn't much of an age gap between those two actors, so it would suggest that they were father and son. Like, they may be like 12 or 13 years. But and then there's a whole bit in there where his son dies, and it is so like, who cares?
Yeah.
The scene was just like, okay. Not even the actor in the scene playing Lothar cared. Like, he watched that scene, he just has this
Yeah,
blank look on his face.
he's not the best, unfortunately.
Yeah. And yeah, it was just like, and then you also had the half orc woman who was like their prisoner who's played by what's his name's ex-wife,
Paula Patton.
Paula Patton, yeah, who was married to um, how was his name? Was Thick, um, Robin Thicke.
Uh, Also, so this is just how overly lore obsessed this movie was. Since she is only described as a half-breed in the film, some might mistake Garona as a half-human, half-orc hybrid, which I did.
Yes,
In
I did too.
reality, she is born of an orc and a Draenei, an ancient, intelligent, magic-sensitive race.
And I knew less now than I did before.
Apparently, her last name is full name is Garona Hoforken.
Huh.
That's a little bit on the nose,
Yeah.
or on the tusk if you prefer.
Yeah.
I'd say that they really tried to set her up as another major player in the movie because she was like pulled between the two worlds.
Yeah.
But like that wasn't terribly interesting either.
No, it wasn't. Yeah.
And also the guy who Khadgar.
Khadgar. Yeah.
These names are making me more tongue twisted than normal.
Yeah.
Khadgar. She says, Khadgar is awkward around me because he wishes to bed me. It's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
yeah, that's some natural dialogue there.
Yeah.
With Khadgar, they keep making a big point out of the fact that, oh, well, he was in the Magic Order, but he left the Magic Order, but he still knows magic, but he left the Magic Order. And, oh, isn't it a thing that he left the Magic Order? We don't know what the Magic Order is. Why do we care that he left?
Yeah.
It's like, I'm just going to, like as always, I'm going to bring things back to Star Wars. We didn't necessarily understand what being a Jedi Knight was in A New Hope, but it was cool that Obi-Wan was one because he demonstrated some neat tricks and skills and told us, like, oh, guardians of peace for 1,000 generations.
Yes. Yeah. And then yeah.
But like, if this is the equivalent of if Obi-Wan had said, "Oh yes, I'm a former Jedi Knight," throughout the movie, and you never really got into it more than that. Like, oh, I left
Yeah.
the Jedi Order. Actually, it would be like if Ahsoka had been the Obi-Wan character instead, and had refused to clarify at any point in New
Yeah.
Hope.
Yeah. Well, I was a Jedi, but then I left the Order. Oh, what's a Jedi?
You have powers, whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll tell you later.
Yeah, you swing a laser sword around. Yeah.
Um. So yeah, the human side just. I don't know if it was the actors or the writing or a combination of the two that just sapped all the life from it, almost as much as the fell magic sapped the life out of everything around it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, to get back to the part of the movie I have a little bit of praise for, I liked the orc scenes because they established the stakes. They had scenes between. They basically had orc tribal politics,
Hmm.
and I felt like with the main bad Gul'dan, the guy who had the fell magic, that they did a good job. You just had a sense of how evil he was.
Yeah.
But they also did a good job of showing why the orcs would follow him outside of fear, because like one of the first acts we see him do with the fell magic seems to be a good act, because when Durotan's wife goes into labor, the child seems to be born stillborn, and so while it's kind of horrific that Gul'dan pulled the life out of this tiny deer and gave it to this child, it's like, okay, if you have a medicine man who can do that, you see why the orcs would follow this guy.
Yeah.
And I don't care enough about the ending to spoil it, because it doesn't really end, because this movie is a prologue for a sequel they were obviously hoping for.
Yeah. Yeah. And I the whole that whole last battle scene at the end, and then the duel between there's so many of these scenes in here. They're supposed to be emotionally impactful. That's the problem I had with it. They're supposed to be emotionally impactful, but then they just fall flat because it's like you haven't really earned the right for us to care about these characters enough to for when they
Yeah.
so when they die, it's like, okay, yeah, all right.
Like I found myself a little bit disturbed when Durotan died because he challenges Gul'dan in some sort of ancient ritual, and they fight with each other, and Gul'dan is ultimately forced to cheat and just drain the life out of him. That was kind of horrifying to watch.
Yeah, that
And
was,
and
yeah,
since he was the closest we had to a protagonist, that also means that the character I cared about the most died very early on in the climax.
yeah, yeah. And if you're wondering what happens with the his son, his wife gets away, and then she does a baby Moses
Yep.
with their son.
Literally a baby Moses. I guess it wasn't a basket of reeds, but still, basically
Yeah,
just as
yeah,
good.
yeah, close enough. Yeah,
Then there's a goofy bit where she dies, like it's like she has to die fighting, but it looks goofy because she just turns around and jumps on this guy. Didn't she impale herself on his weapon as she was
yes,
jumping at him? It's like,
yeah,
come on, just let her be a victim.
yeah,
Now she just looks like she's incompetent.
yeah,
Um, yeah, and then the king dies, but as his men are surrounded as the horde is invading, he tells Garona, the half orc, oh, you it's too late for me. I'm going to die. Kill me, and you'll be accepted by your people. And I kind of was wondering how he had such a intricate knowledge of the orc culture and society that he would even think of that.
yeah. Well, it went back to a conversation that uh, she had with the queen, where she says, "Oh, if I kill you, I'll be elevated very highly in the orc
Mm.
society." So it's basically just a one-off line that king wasn't even there for that conversation.
Oh man, that's worse than I thought it was.
Yeah,
Uh, and now I'm reminded of as I often am of a Simpsons line. Uh, uh, the king, Garona, kill me. What? Why? Well, because then you'll be in charge of the mob, and maybe you can lead it in wise directions. But yeah, so at the end, it doesn't feel like it is basically just a prologue story, and you almost wonder if this would have been better off being told in flashbacks in the next movie.
yeah, probably. Yeah, I
Because
don't
like,
know.
give us a few minutes with Durotan. Heck, like if I was going to rewrite this, I would just cut to the son being like Gul'dan's right hand orc, and then finding out how his father came to die.
Yeah, yeah, that's how I'd do it too. But
Yeah, some more context. Trying to think if there's anything else that's interesting here. The king's son looked surprisingly not mixed, considering that the king's wife was a person of color, which I thought was interesting.
yeah, and the king's wife is Lothar's sister. They look
Wow.
nothing alike.
Yeah. Also, apparently, the wife never existed in the original source material, so that's kind of funny.
Oh boy.
Um, then, yeah, that's
Yeah.
basically the story. Now let's talk about the presentation. I ended up liking the special effects more than you did,
Mm.
and or at least what your initial impression. I think it worked as well as it did because it just leaned into the stylization of how they handled Warcraft. Because of course, Warcraft 3 and World of Warcraft, 3D graphics from the early 2000s initially. So it was designed to run on any potato that you could purchase and install the game on.
Yeah.
So I actually could buy it a bit more than if they had tried for photorealism.
Yeah. I just I mean I think there were too many movies after Avatar were trying to be like Avatar, and I think this was kind of one of those movies. And it was sort of like after Jurassic Park came out, and they had all the CGI dinosaurs, and every movie had to have CGI in it, and then
Hmm.
more often than not, it just didn't work. It just looked really awful. Now, I'm not saying that the special effects look awful in this movie. I thought the CGI was good, but for me, it was just kind of. I mean, it just it.
Right. I mean, I'm just going to go ahead and pull up a quick image here so the audience can kind of see what we're talking about better. Like
Yeah,
that's basically what you're looking at for a big chunk of the movie. And so there's definitely some uncanny valley there. So it's just a
yeah,
question of, and also orcs without the green skin look kind of strange because they look almost too real.
yeah, yeah, and I just. I mean, yeah, it just didn't look right to me, and I don't know if they had gone with prosthetic makeup like they did with Lord of the Rings, if it looked any better, or if it would be cheaper than if they did the CGI. But I don't know. Give me orcs from Lord of the Rings over this. It's just a preference, I think.
I have a feeling that people who played the games probably appreciated them imitating the style of the games.
Mm,
I think this is kind of like Dungeons and Dragons in the sense that they keep overestimating how much the movie-going audience cares about some of these properties that are kind of niche fantasy stuff.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I can see that. Yeah. Yeah.
And this would have been after. Well, no, okay. This was almost certainly in production before Game of Thrones really hit.
Yeah, Game of Thrones was 2014, I think.
Yeah, so this wouldn't have been trying to chase that trend at all.
No.
This was just somebody going, "Oh, we can have our own Lord of the Rings with Lord of the Rings is over. What can take its place? Aha, that Warcraft thing that my son plays too much of."
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the movie was directed by Duncan Jones, who I think before this he did I can't remember the name, Source Code, I think was what it was called, with Jake Gyllenhaal, where he was in a time loop on a train.
Hmm.
Um,
Yep, you are correct.
okay, yeah, yeah, and and for those of you wondering, Duncan Jones is the son of the late great David Bowie. So you know how he got into the industry.
Yeah, I think I think at the end of the day, we're kind of just disappointed by this movie. I feel like you had some good beats there, and I don't know it well enough to know if this was strangled by being too close to the source material, or if they just went in their own way and thus got too far away from the source material and things stopped making sense.
Yeah, yeah, it's hard to tell. And the other aspect with the movie that we forgot to mention was how bad the editing was.
Oh, right. Like there were scenes where the half orc lady was like responding to somebody and it cut mid scene.
Yeah, and I went and looked at it, did a little homework on it. Apparently, Duncan Jones did acknowledge that the movie had editing and pacing issues,
Hmm.
and yeah,
So,
so
so unlike certain DCU directors, he kind of just manned up and admitted it.
yes, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, but overall, yeah, this movie was not very good, and it continued the trend of bad video game adaptations of movies.
Yeah, that we're only just starting to break out of.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Yeah.
Uh, Well, speaking of adaptations,
Yes. My solo review for this week, which DB will be able to participate in this because I know he's seen it. I went
twice,
ahead and what's that?
twice in fact.
Twice. Oh yeah. So I've been getting managed to get back into Demon Slayer, and got through the first season, and so I saw on Crunchyroll that there was either the Mugen Train movie or the Arc, which was basically the movie split into episodes. So I went ahead and watched the movie, and it's. I mean, I thought it was a good movie. It definitely delves. You get a little more of a sense of the characters, particularly with like Tanjiro and Zenitsu and I'm blanking on the guy wearing the boar mask.
Inosuke.
Inosuke, thank you. Yeah,
It's ironic that you forgot his name, considering that one of his gags is that he can never remember anybody's actual name.
right. Yeah, yeah. He keeps calling Tanjiro like, just every name other than Tanjiro.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this the movie picks up where season one ends. It sees Tanjiro, Inosuke, and Zenitsu boarding a train because they've been getting word that people have been going missing on this train, and they think it's a demon. And of course, they meet up with the fire guy,
Rengoku.
Rengoku, and of course Rengoku is just this really cool guy, and they take to him pretty quickly, and
He's just a fun, high energy character.
he is, yeah. And but then as they're on the train, they quickly realize something's wrong, and their tickets get punched by the conductor, and then they all fall asleep, and it's because they all enter this dream state because of the demon, who's one of the Musan's underlings. And I thought obviously the highlight with all the dreams was with Tanjiro, of course. He's dreaming that he's back with his family and they're all alive, and Nezuko is human and she's not a demon. And
Right. It's very much like the classic Alan Moore Superman comic for the man who has everything.
Yeah,
And like has to tear himself away from the pleasant illusion.
yeah, yeah. My only complaint about that was that took a little too long for him to do that. But I think that was probably because they just really wanted to hammer in the emotional impact of it.
Yeah, Demon Slayer can be a bit schmaltzy at times.
Yeah,
and by a bit schmaltzy at times, I mean melodramatic all the time, because that's the way it rolls.
yeah. I noticed that. Yeah, and but of course the other aspect of it too is that the demon has these kids working for him, and they're all tied with these ropes, and they're in the dream because they're trying to find the source of their happiness or whatever it was.
Right, it's like get rid of that and you trap them in the dream world forever, I think.
I think that's right, yeah. And of course Zenitsu and Inosuke's dreams are just like hilarious.
Yeah. Inosuke is like, man, you have a diseased mind.
Yeah. Yeah, and Zenitsu is just, of course, madly in love with Nezuko. And I did like that part when Nezuko wakes up and she sees her all asleep, and she tries to wake up Tanjiro by headbutting him, and of course Tanjiro has a really hard head, so it doesn't work. But yeah, and of course the movie really gets going once they all wake up, and then they have to fight the demon, and then it all culminates in the climactic battle with just last name the fire.
Well, it's kind of interesting because there's two climaxes.
So that's true. Yeah.
So like it kind of works. It works better because it's part of a bigger series. But if you were just watching this as a standalone movie, it always feels weird pacing wise with it.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. You definitely have to have watched the first season of Demon Slayer to really know what's going on in this movie.
Right. Which, considering this was one of the bigger, this made like 50 million in the U.S. during the pandemic. I'm gonna guess that a lot of parents were dragged along, or people who just wanted to go see a movie and nothing else was coming out.
Yeah.
And I feel like the movie is self-contained enough until you get to so they spoiler alert, they do dispatch the train demon,
Yeah.
but then another one of Muzan's higher underlings shows up and gets into a big fight with Rengoku.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is very much a what you would expect from a shonen anime fight scene between two very powerful characters, and of course, and sadly, Rengoku doesn't make it. And 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 of course, Tanjiro goes on one of his rants at the demon. Like, you didn't win, you lost, and da, da, da.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you coward!
Yeah,
Because uh, honestly speaking, Rengoku would have had him if he didn't have his demon healing factor.
right, yeah. And of course, the entire time, yeah, the demon, he's trying to get away because the sun's coming up, and if Tanjiro and Inosuke had just, it sort of reminded me of like Optimus Prime, Megatron, and Hot Rod. If Hot Rod hadn't gotten in the way, Megatron would have been dead, and it's kind of the same
Yeah.
thing there.
Yeah, in this case, our heroes were just shredded after fighting the train demon. So like
Yeah,
what I liked about this in like the context of the bigger series is that in the previous arc with the spiders, they'd really just they've done a good job of showing just how powerful the Hashira, who are the high ranked demon slayers.
yeah,
For those who aren't as weeby as me, Hashira apparently means pillars. Like they're the pillars holding up the whole demon slayer organization.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, and so in the previous arc, we'd gotten a sense of just how much more powerful they were than our characters or than our main heroes. And then this comes right after, and you're like, hey, guess what? Still ain't shit compared to a demon.
yeah,
Get
yeah,
wrecked.
yeah, indeed, yeah. But no, I enjoyed the movie. After of course, after seeing the first season of Demon Slayer, it's a good uh tie-in with the overall universe, and it's I I was kind of avoiding Demon Slayer a little bit because of its popularity. Because it's
The
like,
good old hipster reaction.
right, yeah. But no, I see why people enjoy this series, and I see why the manga is constantly outselling Western comics, and you know,
Yep.
yeah,
Now I'll say, so I've ended up seeing this in movie form and in the form of the TV season.
mm,
I think having seen both versions, the first episode of the TV series version of it does have a solo Rengoku adventure. So and it does explain it, like it gives you a better sense of his character. It's not 100% necessary, but I would like if I was going to recommend how somebody watched the this story, I would say watch the first episode of the second season, then just go back and watch the movie. Because aside from like the little Taisho secrets at the end of each episode and the getting to watch the theme song and things like that, there isn't really a lot that gets added to it.
yeah, okay, yeah, yeah. I was curious about that too, yeah, because I was like, when I watched the movie, and then I saw on Crunchyroll the episodes, and I see the thumbnails on all of them. I'm like, okay, well, that's all from the movie, and I read the descriptions, and I'm like, okay, do I really need to watch these episodes, or am I good?
Right? It's a bit like Dragon Ball Super, where there are two storylines that were movies originally and then got chopped up into episodes for the main TV show.
Mm,
You're best off watching both Battle of Gods and Revival F in movie form and just pretending that the show doesn't exist around them. Or
yeah,
I just you just watch the episodes that bookend them.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed yourself.
yeah.
Glad it wasn't a slog.
No, no, it was not.
Uh, unlike the First World War.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what I call a transition.
Oh
So,
yeah,
so 1917. It's kind of funny. We usually go for like a classic movie and a new movie.
yeah,
I think this is the shortest gap between our classic and new movies we've had since 2016 to 2020.
Yeah. Mm.
But I believe this was your suggestion, Daniel.
Yeah, I've been meaning to watch this movie for a while, because number one, like I've seen like a lot of movies about World War II, but very few about World War One, and I'll admit that I really don't know much about World War One, at least the nitty gritty of it. Like I mean, I get like I get what the battle tactics and everything, but like if you ask me like a specific battle from World War One, like I couldn't tell you. Unlike World War Two, where like I mean I could tell you all about the Battle of the Bulge or the invasion of Normandy and all that, but or like Iwo Jima and
Right.
yeah, but World War One is a different story because I really beyond like what was going on, like I said, like with the trench warfare and then of course like the aftermath of World War One, which is basically the catalyst of World War Two, because if
Right.
you ask a certain former mustache leader of Germany,
Well, that the World Wars were a bit like the Terminator franchise in the sense that
yeah,
in the sense that the first one isn't as good as the second one, so everyone always just talks about the second one, and we don't really need a third one.
right, yeah, yeah, two was enough.
But yeah, I'm in a similar boat. But part of it is just that World War One is kind of monotonous and samey in the sense that
Mhm.
since it was just pushing back and forth over the same stretch of country, whereas and sure there were some fights in the colonies in Africa and Asia and whatnot, but not
Yeah,
anything near that level. Just because Germany wasn't a colonial power on the same scale as England and France.
right, yeah.
Uh, and so most of the battles of the World War One are a series of catastrophes like Gallipoli or pushing back and forth across the same stretches of Belgium and France.
Yeah.
So
Fight if
that
yeah.
doesn't lend itself as much to exciting stories.
Right. Yeah. It literally was a war of inches. I mean, they're fighting each other over like just like a few inches and a few feet of land every time, and it was. Yeah, I can imagine trying to fight a war like that, and like, okay, well, how are we gonna win this thing? It's just like we can't go more than a few feet before our men get slaughtered. It's just. Uh,
Right. Uh, and I want to say that they had just mined the hell out of the North Sea, which is why my immediate post World War One combined arms brain is going, why weren't you landing in Hanover or something
right.
to
Yeah.
try to get behind it? But
Mm,
that's neither here nor there. So the movie itself is a much more it's much more ground level, uh, like an awful day in the life of a couple of soldiers.
yeah. Yeah. And good to see you, Ninja.
Oh, hey, Ninja.
Um, Yeah, so the movie starts off where we got these two soldiers. One of them's taking a nap, and that's Schofield, and then the other soldier is named Baker. I want to say was his name Tom Baker
Was it Blake?
or Blake. Yeah, I was thinking
You're
like, oh,
thinking of a Doctor Who. Yeah.
I'm thinking of Doctor Who. Yeah, that's why I'm like, was his name Tom Baker? Because like that's the same as the guy who played Doctor Who.
Uh, Also, just a quick thing. I think early on we're just going to say spoiler alert.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
the non-spoiler thoughts are this movie is on Netflix. It's definitely worth a watch if you're interested in the time period. It's also
mhm.
just a very well shot movie, very intense, very hard to watch at certain points. So this is not a feel good movie at all,
No, it
remotely.
isn't. No, yeah, yeah. It was directed by Sam Mendes, who directed Skyfall and Spectre in the two middle Daniel Craig James Bond movies, and it might look like it was filmed in one continuous shot, but it wasn't.
Right. That's the trick of the movie is that, especially in the first half, it's shot so that it tricks you into thinking it was just shot in one go.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, the cuts are all are like like if the camera goes behind a wall or a pillar, or or
Right.
yeah,
And
and
I couldn't really spot any of them. I
uh,
was like, once I realized what they were doing, I was on the lookout for it, but they hit it well.
no, they did, yeah. And Mendez did a similar, the same trick at the beginning of Spectre, during the Day of the Dead parade. So if you watch like the first like 3 or 4 minutes of Spectre, he does the same thing there. But yeah, yeah, and it's of course, yeah, like I said, it's a World War I movie, so it's very, as you would expect, a very harsh, harsh, violent movie because it's a war movie. But yeah, uh, it's not like Saving Private Ryan like level, but it's certainly in that realm.
Yeah. So okay, so now we're going to get into spoiling the heck out of this movie.
Yes,
Uh, so one thing I really liked in the opening was when you had Schofield, who's just called Show for short. Uh,
show feel like, yeah,
uh, um, when he's taking a nap, you see this beautiful, pristine field behind him,
yeah.
and it's like you're just transitioning from normal life, and then he goes into the trenches, and you just see the signs of the battle. Like there's injured people. I want to say there's a couple of bodies around.
Yeah.
I forget if there were bodies in that opening scene, but it's like it's very gray, probably because there's so much dust in the air from the continuous bombardment. So you definitely get like it's definitely a very sudden transition into what the life of the war is like.
Yeah, yeah, and so yeah, we got Blake and Schofield or Show. They go into they get called into a trench because they're talking to this big general who's so one of the things about this movie is that there are some like big name actors in the movie, but they all have very small roles in there.
Right, Colin Firth's in it.
Uh, Benedict Cumberbatch,
Gesundheit.
Mark Strong, the guy who played Moriarty in the Cumberbatch Sherlock Holmes series. Um, yeah, so they get these orders from their general because one of their battalions is about to get wiped out by the Germans because the Germans are uh, basically playing possum. Uh,
Right. They've
yeah,
done a strategic withdrawal and cut the lines of communication to the new front that they've established in the hopes of baiting in a British attack.
right. Yeah, and we learned that Blake's brother is in that battalion, and so Blake has to. So they basically order Blake and Schofield to take the orders to the colonel who's in command of the battalion. That's Cumberbatch.
Right. And he's
And,
very much aggressive, fight, 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 end this thing as soon as possible.
right.
Uh,
Yeah.
Damn the consequences.
Yeah. And so Blake's really motivated because he's got to get there before his brother is potentially killed, and Show is basically just he kind of gets a little mad at Blake because he basically volunteered him for this to go with him, and he's just like
Right. This awful mission.
yeah, this awful mission where they have to go
Like,
across.
like, like
Yeah,
they have a. I'd say that Blake and Show have this classic, like, I guess I'll call it like a. It's like a constant duality I see in things that are British related, where you'll have like it's almost like the character archetypes from Hot Fuzz, where you have the more serious, thin, gaunt guy, and the fat, well-meaning guy who's a little bit befuddled by life.
yeah,
And they just have an immediate chemistry between them, where it's like you get the sense that they're both friends, but like they aren't afraid to be irritated at each other.
right, yeah, and so they're going through this this battlefield and going into this German area, and you pointed this out during the movie, or as they're going through there, they're crawling, getting around this barbed wire, and Show cuts his hand on the barbed wire, and and you rightfully pointed out that, I mean, first of all, there are a lot of bacteria in barbed wire, and
Right.
yeah, and so at the very least, he would probably get a staph infection from that.
Right. And then on top of that, so they make him a rough bandage with some cloth that they had. I forget
Yeah.
where the cloth came from, but I almost want to say they cut off part of one of their shirts.
No, I think it was in his pack. I think he had
Okay,
a
maybe it was an actual bandage.
yeah,
But so then they're climbing over this what was no man's land before the Germans retreated, and it's like you realize that these pits and mud holes that they're going through, these were carved by artillery blasts. These are not naturally occurring depressions. They're just, so much artillery was shot that, um, like just as a statistic I heard, uh, there were some battles in the First World War where more artillery and cannons were fired than in the entirety of the American Civil War from start to end in one day.
that doesn't surprise me at all. Yeah,
Yeah. So, and it's just like there's just these big rats all over the place. There's corpses all around,
yeah,
and adding to my, what I was expect, what as they're climbing down at one point, Show's hand ends up going through the rib cage of a dead German soldier, and this is
yeah,
the hand that had been cut open.
yeah,
So, the expectation that was planted in my head was, oh, I see how this is going to go. Like Show's going to die at some point because he's got to have like a raging infection now because this is
yeah,
pre-antibiotics, so he's gonna have, they're gonna have to like cut his arm off or something like that.
yeah,
They didn't really, and of course the whole movie he's using that hand constantly when he's having to fight or climb or
yeah.
crawl. It never comes up.
No, no, it doesn't. Yeah, it kind of gets forgotten. It gets forgotten pretty quickly. Um,
I would call that like it's like the main flaw of the movie. The only reason I'm giving a little bit of credit is that at the end of it, he talks about it's dedicated in such a way that you get the feeling that Sam had heard stories from either his father or his grandfather, or
it
no,
was his
grandfather or
grandfather.
great grandfather, excuse me.
Yeah,
Um, and so maybe like it's one of those things where, well, if it actually happened that way, then who are we to disagree?
right.
But
Yeah,
it kind of just strained credulity a bit that that hand was still like wasn't twice its size and inflamed at the end of the movie.
yeah, yeah,
But
uh, yeah,
but what actually happens is horrifying enough because they get to the German trenches, and from what I know of the World Wars, I really appreciate the attention to detail. The British trenches were designed on the assumption that, oh well, the war is going to be over by Christmas.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
and
and
so
it, like
so they
even
were
says that. Yeah,
and so it's just like it's just very
minimal. Yeah,
very minimal dirt ground. Um, the ramparts are just planks that have been tilted at an angle to hold up the dirt or the earthworks.
yeah,
Everything is very piecemeal.
yeah,
You get to the German trenches and just orderly rows of sandbags, paved ground
yeah.
in the trench. Like they were designed, they had intended to dig in and just stay dug in.
Yeah, they were in it for the long haul. Yeah, and Ninja says Sam's grandfather was a runner, like the main character. Okay, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, they identified the character as like Grandpa Mendez or something like that. So
yeah.
that could have been a great grandfather or something. I'm not sure how old Sam is.
I think he's in his 50s.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
but yeah, yeah,
So then continuing the series of unfortunate events, they're they're in this dormitory that's inside of like basically this underground dormitory,
hmm
and they find a tripwire, and everything looks good until one of the fat German rats sets it off. And
yeah,
I was thinking, oh, well, this is where Show dies. Okay.
yeah,
No, it
yeah.
was not, in fact, where Show died. I
Nope.
think, oh, like his eyes are so full of dust he can't see, and Blake has to. Man, like those were some intense scenes. Just
Yeah,
back on it.
yeah, the scene in the trench as it's falling apart. Yeah, that was tense. Yeah, yeah, I was fully expecting Show to die in there. Yeah, because he couldn't see anything, and there's even a part where he had to jump over a a chasm basically.
Yeah. Right, as this bunker is collapsing around them.
Yeah.
But they managed to get out, and you get some actual countryside there,
Hmm.
and you get some actual countryside there, and they find this barn, and it looks like everything's okay because there's a cow there. The farmers before he left had milked the cow, and
Yeah.
they filled their canteen with milk, and everything's good. And oh, and off in the distance, you can see a couple of British fighters dog fighting with a German fighter,
Yeah, and then the German fighter gets shot down and crashes into the barn.
lighting on a fire and almost running over our heroes.
Yeah.
Um, but I thought it was interesting just how like realistically it was shot because you don't like whenever you see a dogfight in a movie, you're always like switching like you're always like in the fighter perspective or you're switching around. You have a very tight view of it.
Yeah.
It looks very different and almost like almost disconnected watching a dogfight from a ground perspective because it just looks like they're kind of drifting along lazily.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Eh, yeah, yeah, because yeah, because of course with the way that they filmed it, it had to be from the ground. It couldn't, yeah, you couldn't make those cuts in there like that. And but yeah, it did kind of look a little. I wonder if those planes were CGI.
It's possible, but I more took it to be like, well, I guess yeah, that's what it would basically look like if you're watching guys dogfighting on slow biplanes.
No, yeah, yeah, and then you go from like, that's, oh wow, the plane got shot down. Oh no, it's
Oh
coming right
crap!
at
It's
us.
drifting this way.
Yeah,
And then showing a moment of humanity, they pull the German fighter pilot out of the burning plane,
yeah,
and this rat bastard stabs Blake in the stomach.
yeah. Um, very, yeah, very shocking moment. And yeah, of course, I'm watching. I'm sitting there going like, okay, well, maybe maybe it's not that bad, and
Right.
they'll patch him up. But like, but then I started seeing the color draining from his face. I went, oh
Yeah.
no.
That was some good makeup work.
Yeah, yeah, and and sadly, Blake then doesn't make it, and then he gives show the orders, and then and show takes Blake's rings because just in case he or probably to send it to his family or
Yeah.
give it to his brother. um but yeah, it was just like, oh man, like you're not expecting that. You're kind of expecting the opposite to happen.
Right. It seemed more like well, I guess it's almost it's like in Saving Private Ryan. Ryan was the one to survive when he was like the more wide-eyed innocent one in comparison.
Yeah, yeah,
When instead it was the more cynical one who made it through. So at that point, Schofield, who is played by George McKay, has to carry the whole movie on his shoulders.
mhm.
And I was kind of initially worried about that, but he's good at a bunch of silent acting that he has to do for the rest of it when he doesn't have someone to bounce off of.
Right, yeah. Yeah, the only time he ever bounces, the only time that ever happens is like if he's talking to other, like when he gets picked up by the other British soldiers, and then
Right.
he finds he takes shelter in a house, and there's a young French woman in there caring for a war orphan baby, and
Yeah. Oh yeah. So the second time when I felt like, okay, this is where they're really hammering in that Cho is going to get a horrible infection in his hand.
yeah,
Because he gets picked up by another British group. Now it's like, of course, the other soldiers show up as soon as Blake is dead, but it's like they couldn't have really done anything to help him anyway, as deep as that stab wound was.
yeah, yeah,
But uh, so their truck gets stuck. They're pushing along, and Show ends up falling into the muck up to like his shoulder practically, uh,
yeah,
with and only on the injured arm, not on the good arm. So it's like, okay, this is where they're really working a lot of muck into their. Nope, not happening.
no, yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
Chekhov's gun remains firmly above the mantle.
yes, yeah, and yeah, and then there's the whole yeah, and also too, like he's always going in water too. He'll
Yeah,
Yeah, he ends up like in a river, and I'm telling you, that river, that water is not clean water.
No, especially with probably a whole division's worth of Germans upstream from it.
Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, so he ends up going with these guys for a bit, but he ends up separating with them when their paths diverge.
yeah,
Uh, I think to myself, I almost wonder if realistically the other commander would have put a couple of his guys to help out this now solo messenger, but that would have made things too easy for poor Show. Because
yeah,
this
yeah,
movie is basically how can we make Show miserable moment to moment?
yeah. What's
Because
yeah,
well, yeah, he ends up yeah, has to cross a river under fire from a German, and this German hits him in his helmet at the same time he kills the German, so he falls down the steps and is knocked out and has a bloody back of his head,
yeah, yeah,
which is like I kept thinking to myself, okay, if this movie is basically happening in real time, they have loads of spare time right now to get there by morning. How is this going to happen?
yeah, yeah. And he got knocked out for probably like 3 or 4 hours at least.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because it was nighttime, and to go back to the excellence in the directing, they're in this bombed out French villa or French Belgian,
yeah, French Belgian, yeah,
somewhere like that, and I, so the intensity of the little skirmishes he has to have, you see like the artillery barrages lighting the sky, and just like
mm,
how well they handled the flashes of light that he had to work with temporarily, and
mm.
it was again it was horrifying because you if you play go back to a Warcraft for a moment there, if you're just playing an RTS and you order a artillery barrage on a quadrant, you don't really think about what it looks like from the perspective of somebody in there.
Right, yeah, yeah, or the part when they're kind of like in a square kind of thing,
Hmm.
and then he sees a German soldier off in the distance, and the camera's behind him, and you see that soldier running right at him.
Yeah.
That
Eh,
was like,
yeah, like they just were occasionally getting a pillar between them, and the soldier kept just missing.
yeah,
Uh, they do an excellent job ramping up the tension. And we keep
mm,
using that word tension. I think that's the overall feeling of this movie is just constant tension.
yeah, yeah, because there's he's constantly under threat, which makes sense given the setting that he's in. It's just
Yep.
yeah, and I think the part that I think what got me more than anything about this movie was just all of the dead bodies that were everywhere. It was just
Yeah.
there. I mean, everywhere he went, there were just dead bodies, and it's just
Yeah.
which that's how it was, and in that war, it was just they were everywhere, and especially like mentioned in the river, when he's getting shot at so much, and then he has to jump in the river, and he has to climb over these dead bodies to get out, and it's just like,
Yeah. Ugh, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So, and he has a scene like we mentioned where he ends up having to give up the milk he had saved for himself to this French woman to feed her child, and he
yeah,
has like this moment of I guess the last temptation of Schofield, where it's like you can just set your mission aside and hang out with this cute French girl who likes you,
yeah.
or at the very least enjoys having you around because you can protect her a bit.
Well, but there's a reason he didn't, though. When we get to the end of the movie, yeah, because well, I don't know if I want to jump that far ahead, but because you do find out that he has a wife and kid back in England.
Oh, right, right.
Yeah, so
But it is still the temptation is there
that's true. That's
to just
true.
like relax and hide out.
Yes, yeah, that's true. But
But
yeah,
and see, I guess I just had been kind of overwhelmed at that scene, and I hadn't realized that was his wife and kid. I thought that was just like generically his family or something.
mm, yeah,
Uh, anyway, so and then he finally uh, there's a scene where he shows up with he comes across the battalion he was looking for finally,
yeah,
and they're just all sitting around there as like it's like they have the one guy in the platoon who can sing, like singing to them before they go off to die.
yeah,
Movie is
yeah.
not afraid to have some quiet moments like that.
Yeah, 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 and he's leaning, yeah, and he's leaning up against a tree, and he's just exhausted.
Just done.
Yeah.
And yeah, so ultimately, and you get a scene where he's on the edges of a fight that's happening, as soldiers are already being sent up, and he's desperately trying to get to Doctor Strange,
Yeah.
aka the Major or
Yeah.
the Captain or whatever he was, and he has to run into the battlefield for a moment.
Yeah.
Well, did you notice that? Like, so he actually ran into a couple of people who
Mhm.
didn't notice he was there.
Yeah.
You notice that like most of them got up, but one guy just stayed laying down and motionless. Like, oh, I guess he knocked him out. Oops.
Yeah.
um, and he gets there, and mission is accomplished, but there's no real sense of satisfaction because, sure, like he kept that battalion from running into that gauntlet, but
Yeah.
they, they're gonna have to go in there eventually, just with
Yeah.
support.
Yeah, Cumberbatch even says that. He's like, "Oh yeah, well I'm being ordered to stand down now, but then tomorrow I'm going to be ordered to attack." It's
Right, because the general almost was trying to portray Cumberbatch's character as being irrationally battle thirsty, but it's like it's going to happen one way or the other. Might as well get it over with and try to catch Jerry with his pants down.
right. Yeah. And yeah, he stands them down, and then Show actually does find Blake's brother, and it's I don't remember the actor's name, but he was actually in Eternals, so there's another Marvel
Oh
connection
no!
there. He was the villain in Eternals.
Oh no!
Yeah.
He did kind of look like the dead Blake at that point, which I thought was a nice touch that they cast somebody who you could believably see as someone's brother.
Yeah, yeah, and well, Blake even tells him that. He says, "My brother looks like me, but older." Yeah,
Yeah. Uh, yeah, so he gives him his effects, and he sits down, refusing any medical care, and just looks at the pictures of his family, and the movie's over. Because
yeah,
it's like, yeah, I mean, he accomplished his mission, but at what cost? And is it going to actually matter in the long run?
yeah. Which is the story of, I would say, both world wars. Is, they do accomplish something. They'll accomplish a mission like that, but then, you know did they actually, it was it meaningful? Did they
Yeah,
actually, yeah, it was it, you know did, you know in the long run, is it is it going to mean anything? Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, so I'll just say that my bias is usually towards I like happier movies usually,
Mhm.
but I feel weird saying I enjoyed that movie considering like the whole experience we just talked about was
Yeah.
kind of horrific, but it was just so well shot, and it definitely elicited the emotions it was supposed to elicit.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought so too. Yeah. And yeah, I'd definitely recommend this movie for, anybody, if even if you're not a World War I person, or war person. I mean, I think it's definitely worth a watch. Yeah.
Yeah, and what I would say is that it feels very realistic. The only plot armor that show really had, outside of a few bits of luck, was not having a raging staph infection. And I would love to talk with Sam and wonder and ask, like, did you consider that? Like that, because
Yeah.
you kept perfectly setting up a horrific infection that never happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe one day. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. But yeah.
Definitely ending on the stronger movie this week. It occurs
Yes.
to me that the common element of all three of the things we discussed was uh, all three of them present a seemingly ceaseless back and forth between two sides,
Yes. Yeah.
and you can, and all of them wonder if you actually made a difference in the end. So that's kind of funny when you think about it like that. But
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, I'd say 1917 is definitely the bigger piece of art.
Mhm.
Demon Slayer Mugen Train is definitely the more crowd pleasy one that um, has a happier view of the world, I would say.
Yeah.
And Warcraft exists.
It's Oh, that's a great way to end a great place to end our reviews here.
Yep.
Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. We appreciate it as always, and sorry
Indeed.
about sorry about the mix up at the beginning. I'll have to figure out what to do with regards to streaming on X, but we'll see how that goes.
Yep.
But yeah, so leave a like on the stream, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Yeah.
If you're a Warcraft stan and you think our take on this movie is awful, tell us why.
Indeed, yeah. And we'll be back next week at our regularly scheduled day and time. So
Indeed.
yeah, later, everybody.
Good night.